Yes, flip-flop, not so much the fly. Éric Duhaime, who, I don't know, 2 days ago, 2 weeks ago, 2 years ago, had no issue with Bill 96, all of a sudden has decided, you know what, I don't feel the same way this time around. I want to know what you think about this.
Well, he did have an issue with Bill 96 in the sense that, the folks listening will recall that in the last election, he stood at a platform with a big sign in front of it with a red bar diagonally across Bill 96 saying he would cancel the law. And that got him a whole bunch of votes. It helped contribute to his very large vote count. He got precisely 0 seats, which is absolutely the same number that he's going to get this time, 0 seats. Look, this is not going to be an election for boutique political parties. We're not going to go through what we went through in 2022 when Legault got just over 40% of the vote and the other 60% was divided among 4 parties. That's not going to happen because there's something terrifying on the horizon, which is the threat of breaking up Canada, a referendum on separation, and, of course, the ensuing separation, if not the ensuing chaos. So I think that the average Quebecer is going to do exactly the same thing as the average Canadian voter did a year ago, almost exactly to the day, and say, no, sorry, there's a big fight on here, and there's no room for these, small parties. And Duhaime is just writing himself out of the story a little bit faster. So it shows that he's a very fast guy, but he will have been written out of the story one way or the other. He's just doing it to himself.
But Tom, I was seeing polls showing that, they've gained a bit more strength. There are a couple of ridings around the Quebec City area where the Conservatives actually are leading. My question, I guess, to you is, how does a guy go, as you described it, from, I'm going to scrap Bill 96, and yes, and there's no question about it, to, you know what, I've changed my mind. And this comes basically a week after Charles Milliard kind of was caught in between as well. Why has this become such a big issue?
Because he's trying to curry favor with part of the nationalist base. Don't forget, the art of being François Legault and the CAQ has meant you're able to look at the nationalist audience, say, we don't have to do separation, at least not right away. Put us in power, and we promise no referendum. That was one of the key promises of François Legault, and people went for it. And then they didn't like him after 4 years in the Quebec City area in some places, and that's where Éric Duhaime got a bunch of votes as well. He got a lot in Montreal as well because people liked the bit about being against Bill 96, but he's got nothing to offer going into this next election. These are platitudes of somebody who has vague, ideas of libertarian economics. It's based on nothing. He used to be a guy who had a radio show in Quebec City. I've been on it any number of times, but I also know Quebec City quite well. The PQ thinks that they're going to do great in Quebec City. They're not going to do anything in Quebec City. Going right back to the 1980 referendum and the fact that Quebec City was expected to go in a romp in favor of separation, Quebec City voted massively no in 1980. And it's a very conservative place in the sense of, not wanting stuff to go too fast, don't want to be pushed around. Paul Saint-Pierre Plamondon of the Parti Québécois is promising another referendum on separation. And anybody who went through the 80 and the 95 referendum, and I know you, like me, went through both, knows just how bad that is. It's bad in the workplace. It's bad in the province. It's bad everywhere. Even in families, it's very divisive. And nobody in the right mind is going to be voting for that. So 75% of Quebecers are against that. And what's going to happen this time is that people are just going to vote strategically. And right now, it's going to come down to a question of which of the Liberals of Milliard or the CAQ of Fréchette is going to be that vehicle. It's lining up to be Christine Fréchette and the CAQ, believe it or not. Nobody would have thought a year ago that the CAQ could resuscitate, but they're about to resuscitate under Christine Fréchette, who's shown that, yes, Quebecers want to change, but she can be the incarnation of that change at the head of this party. That everybody wanted to get rid of Legault, but they're going to be fine with the CAQ if it means that they can block the referendum.
But what about this idea that most of her cabinet are the same people who were in François Legault's cabinet? Where's the change of the CAQ just because there's a new person heading it?
Well, it's not an idea. It's a fact that it's mostly the same people. But look what she's done. She took the two sourpusses on identity politics and language and immigration, who were Simon-Jeanin Barrette, her justice minister, and who had earlier been in immigration, and Jean-François Roberge, again, this type of scolding, lecturing, us versus them type of approach to Quebec politics. They were both thrown out of identity files. And who did she put in? She put in somebody like Ian Lafrenière, who's not only a really good person, but he understands Montreal. And he understands Montreal cultural communities and linguistic differences very well. And who else did he put in there? Well, in immigration, he put in a guy named François Bonnardel. And Bonnardel is himself the son of an immigrant father. And he's not going to have that sort of scolding, really sharp tone against immigrants and against people who are not the same as him. So she's doing something very subtly right now. She's setting it up. She didn't want to tell, Legault to his face the other day, no, I'm going to tear up some of the really creepy stuff that you did. But a lot of this is going to be before the courts. It'll come out right after the election. It's not going to bother them during the course of the election. She doesn't have to commit on the crazy stuff that we've been going through. But if she can start soft selling some of the crazier identity stuff and show that she's making a real difference, and I think she does, then she has every chance of winning the next election.
I find it interesting, and I want to move on. But, when you talk about François Bonnardel, this is the same guy, of course, linked to the SecLic scandal that François Legault turfed. I mean, I imagine that's going to come up during the campaign as well. He's an easy target, is he not?
No, he was a scapegoat. He was a fall guy for François Legault. He was made to carry the can. And if you watch the whole ceremony of the new ministers being sworn in, there were 2 times when everybody in the room, hundreds of people who were there, from different factions within the CAQ, there were 2 times when they all rose to their feet and applauded really wildly. It's when François Bonnardel made it back into cabinet after Legault had made him the fall guy for SecLic, and it was nothing to do with him. It had all been done before him. And he was barely named in the report, and it was Geneviève Guilbeault who should have been the person, but somehow she escaped and she maintained Legault's favor. The other person was Lionel Carman, who quit on a question of principle, quit cabinet, quit the CAQ caucus, came back in the 2 days before Legault quit and finished his term as premier. And he's accepted to serve out the rest of his term up until October. He's not running again in the next election. But people applauded him wildly because he had shown strong principle in dealing with the doctor's file. He said, look, the legislation we're bringing in is an embarrassment. It's meant to make us lose as many doctors as possible. And by the way, we're still losing doctors, even though they've reversed course. But it's been one of the most disastrous decisions ever. So go to your original point. A lot of these people were around with François Legault as he was destroying the province of Quebec. But a lot of them have a lot of ability, and they're going to be looking for a much more positive route to handling the province under Christine Fréchette.
All right, Tom, I want to move on to the trade negotiations, or whatever we're calling them, between Canada and the U.S. I'm not sure what they actually are. The council, this economic council that the Prime Minister created, which includes Jean Charest.
Yeah.
Jean Charest was asked rather about this. I want you to hear what he said.
We're not deliberately trying to wait this out, by the way. I mean, it isn't a matter of us saying we're just going to wait it out. We just need to be smart on how we are going to do it. We need to stay cool and not react to every statement that's going to come out of the Trump administration. We know by now that a lot of this is a provocation. A lot of this can be very inflammatory. But at the end of the day, the core interest of the American business community and the country is to maintain the deal, Vashi. There's no one out there in the business community in the United States who are seriously saying to this government, the American government, tear up the agreement. No one. So it's a matter of us being patient and smart.
All right. Tom, your reaction to that, patient and smart, that's the way we have to react now?
Yeah, and both sides are playing to type. Because, of course, we get the number one New York loudmouth, Donald Trump, a bit busy with Hormuz, et cetera, these days. So he sends in the number 2 New York loudmouth, Howard Lutnick, to say, quote, Canada sucks. Yeah. I mean, what class? So, yeah, Jean Charest is playing to type as a former Canadian politician. Mark Carney is an active Canadian prime minister, and he's just showing that he's gracious, intelligent, informed, and patient, as Shad had just said, and he's going to get this thing done. Don't take the bait is the bottom line. And I think that they're showing a lot of forbearance and just saying, okay, send in your loudmouths. We don't care. We know you want a deal, and so do we.
Did you see the story that moved, I think this is just a couple of hours ago, on steel or aluminum? The Trump administration, I'm reading off the headline, is now offering Canadian and Mexican aluminum and steel companies immediate tariff relief if they commit to moving production to the United States in the future.
Yeah, it's blackmail, and it's pure Trump. It's like everything that Trump does is written on the back of an envelope, between a hamburger and another, portion of French fries and a Diet Coke. The guy's got no train of thought. He can't stay with an idea for more than 30 seconds at a time. So that's what happened. He winds up attacking Iran and with no game plan, no idea of when it's over or what the strategic objective is. And it's the same thing here. Don't expect Donald Trump to have a game plan for the renegotiation of the Canada-U.S.-Mexico trade deal. He understands nothing about it. He, on a political level, said that the Canada-U.S., the prior treaty, the North American Free Trade Agreement, the NAFTA, was the worst thing ever signed in the history of the world. So he comes up with a new name for it. He calls it the CUSMA, Canada-U.S.-Mexico, or, they have the USMCA. And guess what? If you know both of those agreements and you look at them, there is a heck of a lot of similarities. They're almost identical. But Trump gets to say that his is much better. Yeah. And now that he wants to renegotiate it, he's saying that the one that he signed and put together, so the one that has to be renegotiated, isn't so good after all. So it's pure Trump. It's meaningless, but we've just got to be patient and not stand there and do the same thing as Lutnick and start calling them names. We just got to be smart and stand our ground.
Tom, just the last thing. Did you happen to catch Justin Trudeau yesterday speaking at that CNBC conference?
No, I missed it.
Okay, so he talked about a couple of things. I want you to hear this quote. He's talking about the aluminum sector, as it turns out. Listen to this.
A similar thing happened right now with President Trump threatening the Canadian auto industry, where we're now having to look at working with China because the American industry doesn't want to work with us anymore. And the big example we get right now is on aluminum. Anyone who knows the aluminum industry knows that Canada has, for decades, been one of the great places to make aluminum in the world. Massive amounts of hydroelectricity, access to the raw materials meant that we are a strong, clean, reliable supplier of aluminum that America, the United States, would buy massively from us. Cheap, well-made, proximal, friendly supply chains to Europe, which means when the U.S. finally wakes up and realizes that the fact that they're getting more of their aluminum from Bahrain right now, which isn't exactly the safest part of the world to be relying on for essential supply chains because of other things the U.S. is partly doing, they're going to turn back to us and say, great, we'll take our aluminum back now, and we'll say, not your aluminum anymore. We just signed deals with the Netherlands and everyone else, and those are 5-10-year deals that we're happy to start building more plants if you're really going to sign on deals with us. But that uncertainty of, are you going to throw tariffs on us again, means that we've found better partners for that. And that's a way of getting around some of that economic coercion. Of course, we'd much prefer to sell our aluminum a few hundred kilometers away as opposed to a few thousand kilometers away across the ocean. But that's not a big enough impediment for us to sit back and not act to diversify. And I think those...
Okay, cut off the end there. What do you think of that, Tom? It seems to be taking, that is the government's position, I think, isn't it?
Pretty darn close to it. Yeah. And it should be borne in mind that the agreement, by the way, if we don't get a renegotiation, the existing Canada-U.S.-Mexico trade deal stays in force until 2036 for another 10 years. What Mr. Trudeau is referring to, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, it's exactly the Carney approach. We've got to start finding new partners to deal with because the Americans simply aren't reliable. The key word that he used is uncertainty, and I think that that's the most important thing. If you're looking at a trade deal that's constantly on the verge of being upset by Donald Trump's whims or the whims of the next person who comes along, I don't think that J.D. Vance would be any better in that chair, then you're asking companies to make decisions on investing tens of billions of dollars in new plant and infrastructure, and they're not sure if it's going to be able to produce and work under the agreement anymore. So yes, uncertainty is a key component here, and that's part of the Carney magic.
All right.
We've been working hard to develop new markets.
Tommy, we'll leave it at that. I thank you. I appreciate it. You have a good
Great
weekend.
To be with you.
I'm Luke Wilson. Join me each week for Film Never Lies. Since retiring from the NFL, I've had a lot on my mind, and now I've got my own show. So if you're tired of lazy takes, if you want honest conversations, join us each week. Film Never Lies, available on all TSN platforms and the iHeartRadio app.